So, hello. I am here today with Terry LaDow, who is started out as a mentor, has become a really good friend, is oftentimes mistaken for an angry Santa Claus, uh, but is for the last 27 years has been working specifically with addiction. But he's a licensed, board certified Christian counselor. Really knows what he's doing. You're a pretty smart dude.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah, but more than that, you're kind and thoughtful and point people to Jesus, this is why I love you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that, kiddo. Thanks.
Yeah. So I wanted to have a conversation. We've been talking sort of about how COVID-19 is sort of changing the landscape for us emotionally because of the forced isolation, because of these stressors that have been placed on us and not being able to quite figure it out. We're not being able to figure out life in this. And so I wanted to have a conversation a little bit about what do we do like when what happens to us is out of our control. And so Terry, like, what do we do? Like, things are out of our control and it's happening to us. There's very little that we can make happen at this moment. So what do we do in those situations? What's maybe some of the positive things, but what do we end up doing?
Well, the interesting thing is that the COVID-19 came quickly. It basically overwhelmed society, people, everything. And then there was no clear path to walk. It wasn't an organized process, and they're still trying to figure out what to do with it. But we do know a couple of things. We know number one is we are isolated. We no longer have freedom, is a better way to say it, to go to the store, or to wander around, or go to the park, or go next door, or go to church, or go get your hair cut, which is my problem. So the impact that this has had in our world has changed dramatically how we function. Now, the problem with that is that when you change something that you don't have a choice in, we have to figure out what we're going to do with that. And we're going to do some things that are wise, and we're going to do some things that are not so wise. And with the isolation that's been handed to us, I mean, I have a great family, at least we're on speaking terms most of the time. And but I don't, my next door neighbor, we can wave at each other. My office, where my practice is, I have a couple of 3 people that want to come. And so we're very careful about how we do that. But most everybody, I'm doing electronic counseling now. So there's isolation from normal behavioral patterns. So what do? Okay, we compensate.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? So our compensating behaviors dictate a lot of our behavior patterns that people see. So you said loneliness. That's a big deal. I'm lonely, although I have family and I have a house and I sit and watch TV and I can be with people, but they're the same people. So I don't have many conversations. I can't go have a cup of coffee, for example. There's a lot of things I can't do that would give me connection with people. But I can do electronic connection like we're doing with this program. But the other side of that problem is that I can't touch you. I can't hug you. So there's a connection, but there's an isolation. There's a connection, but there's a loneliness. And when you have kids in the house and you have people in the house, it's like, where do your kids go to play? Where do you go to play? So there's a lot of the impact that isolation brings that we weren't ready for.
Yeah, I mean, so like, but the word connection, it's not the same as community.
No.
Right. And so, and I come back to this like often, and you and I have had this conversation quite a few times, that we were created for community. Connection is great, but what we were created for was community. And so in the absence of community, we sort of take the cheap substitute, which is connection, but it really doesn't allow us to walk through the isolation or the loneliness or or be honest about the compensating behaviors.
No, it doesn't. But the problem is that they're apparent. Other people see them. You know, if for example, you said I work a lot in addictions. The addictive behaviors are now loud because you can't hide, so to speak. You can't get away from them. You can't go and do the things that you were used to do. So if the addiction now is, what do we do with that? Because we weren't prepared for that, and people are finding out things they don't want to know. They're finding out things they had no idea were going on. So the problem, which then gets compounded by guilt and shame, really is creating conflicts in not just the family, but in the outside world. Because it's like, I've lost my tribe, if you will. I used to go to the bar and I would sit and have a drink, and there were my buddies. You know, you have people who are, and I don't want to concentrate on drugs and alcohol, because there's all kinds of different behaviors out there that interfere with our lifestyle and interfere with our connection with people. So you've got a situation where we are the most connected society that's ever walked the face of this earth. We are the most lonely that we've ever been as a community. So the problem is that connection isn't community, like you said. Connection is simply, I see you, you see me.
Yeah.
I pick up my phone, I call you, I text you. Okay, we think that is community. Because how many friends do you have? You know, well, I've got 5 billion friends. That's awesome. No, you don't. You know, the maximum, when we start looking at truly the ability to connect, you're talking about 20, 30 people. And then you start running, you know, those become acquaintances. You're not connected to those people. There's no really a relationship. It's just a, hi, how are you?
And so, like, if we look at this, like, we start with sort of loneliness or isolation, and
Right.
then we have compensating behaviors because we're trying to figure this out. And the reality is, we're all trying to deal with the stress that is new and unprecedented and natural. But we use compensating behaviors that lead us to oftentimes shame or guilt because, man, this thing is starting to control me. It started as a habit, but it has become magnified into a potential addiction. And it could be as simple as my cell phone, or it could be as dangerous as alcohol and drugs or pornography or whatever it is that is sort of placates us in the moment, which leads us into sort of the guilt and shame, leads us into secrecy and more isolation, which starts the process all over again,
all over
essentially.
That's, and if we don't have the freedom to be honest, I hate this personally. This sucks. I am so ready for this to be over because I want to go next door. I want to go get my hair cut. I want to go out to dinner. There's a lot of things I want to do. So that my fuse, if you will, is getting shorter.
Yeah.
And so this impact that we are experiencing is relatively new for an awful lot of people.
And like the temptation in all of this is to hide, right? Like that's the temptation from Adam and Eve, who were like, oh, we messed up, let's hide. And then also along with hiding is sort of disconnected from ourselves emotionally, because we think like if we can just disconnect emotionally from all these things. But it feels like that this, and I think that's what connection allows us to do, actually. The substituting connection instead of community allows us to hide, essentially, because we're hiding in plain sight. Because I'm talking to you and we're connected and I'm on Facebook and you and I, and we do a Zoom call, but I'm not telling you this is what's going on. And people ask me, how am I doing? Oh, I'm doing okay. You know, everybody's stressed, but I'm not sharing with myself or with others what's going on. And then because of that, it makes it easier for me to hide. So this is a really ripe sort of playground to have addiction flare up, to have an old one sort of knock on the door again in a way that it hasn't before, or start a new one because the circumstances are pretty ripe for secrecy and disconnection from community and cyclical shame connected to our loneliness and compensating behaviors.
The reality is that I can hide, like you just said. How are you doing? I'm fine. Yeah, it's a little tough, but I'm fine. Well, no, you're not. But if I tell you I'm not okay, so you have, what does that cost me to tell you that I'm not okay? When we look at all the ways that we communicate, when you look at Twitter and Facebook and Zoom calls and Skype and I don't know what else, because I am illiterate in that area. So when we look at all the ways that we can communicate, what do we want to show people? What's the message I want you to get about me? You know, yeah. Yes, this is hard, but, and yeah, we're struggling, but, and right now, because of compensating behavior, because of the way we need to deal with these emotions that we haven't processed in a way that we did when we were, in quotes, normal in our behavior. I miss church like crazy because there were people there and I get hugs and people would say, how are you doing? And there was people there that I could go, you know, I'm struggling. Would you pray for me? Yeah, I'll pray for you. Okay. And the people would put their hands, we would touch, we would do things that says we're connected. Now I can do the same identical thing, pick up the phone, do a Skype call, etc. And we can do the same thing, but there's this big piece missing. And that's the loneliness piece. So the connection part you're talking about.
And that's the thing that sort of drives a habit from something from being a habit to an addiction, right. Isn't it? I mean, it's really when the isolation of it, like when the habit is something, because a lot of things, sometimes I don't know that maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but it doesn't feel like addiction starts on day one. Oftentimes it's a habit that we control that eventually we realize controls us. Like my habit might be, hey, I'm stressed out, I have a glass of wine at the end of the night. But then that habit, then instead of it being something that I use to calm down at the end of the night, it becomes something that owns me. And I cannot get around it.
You think about it. You go to work and you're gone all day and everything's fine. And you come home and have a glass of wine. Well, you ain't going to work now. And so that glass of wine turns into 2 or 3. There's a lot of things because ultimately it comes down to how I feel. I don't like what's going on. I don't like this. It bothers me. How do I deal with whatever that emotion is? I get angry. How do I deal with that emotion? I'm angry at the government. I'm angry at whoever. I'm angry.
Everything. Yeah.
How do I deal with those emotions? I'm now lonely. So now I'm angry and lonely. Well, that's going to work well. And what do I do with these emotions? Well, now I'm not only angry and lonely, but I don't have any people that I'm really willing to share that with. So now my responsibility, my connection piece, my availability is shutting down. So what happens? And that's why this is, like you were saying, something's going to give. There's going to be a compensating behavior. And what is that behavior going to be? Are you more angry? So now you're angry at the people in your house, because who else can you unload that on? Who else can you share that with? So yeah, you're on the right. I think you're absolutely right.
So if I find myself, so like somebody's here listening and they find themselves, okay, like my habit has become more than a habit. It's become more than my nightly routine and ritual. What are some of the things you can do? I mean, first of all, I think naming things for what they are important and say, okay, like this has got me. I don't have this. But what could somebody do? Or if somebody is like feeling like falling back into addictions that they had conquered before, or or starting new ones that they had never thought of before. What is something somebody can do that's like a really practical, here's step one, like where do I go from here?
Simple, we say this hundreds of thousands of times to people, is pick up the phone and call somebody you trust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's it. The second part of that is, okay, go meet a group of people who are struggling. Well, we can't do that. So we go back to this connection piece of electronically, it's better than nothing. Who can I say I'm not okay to? Who is it all right? We live in a society that says everything's okay all the time. At least I'm fine.
Yeah. So
the part of this thing is there are people in your world that you are real with. You tell them I'm not okay. I'm struggling. I'm angry. I'm tired. We're not cranky. There's people typically in everybody's world that they can share a little bit with. Now, it's not true across the board, but it's most people have some safety, if you will, in their world. That's where you start. Who do you trust is really the question that we ask. Do I trust you? Could I pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, I'm not okay? Well, we've done that before. So yes, I can call you. So they're having that, and it's stepping out of your comfort zone in many ways and doing something that we're not used to doing. But if we don't do that.
So essentially this cycle has to stop at some point.
Yep.
And so if we've hit shame and guilt because we went through loneliness and isolation that led to a compensating behavior, and we hit the shame and guilt, it's not time to double down on the secrecy and isolation. It's the time to expose it and get out of the darkness and say, help me somebody.
If we are willing to do that, which is, I think is hugely important. If I'm willing to say I'm not okay, we as a group of people will show up.
Yeah.
The church will show up. Your friends will show up. The neighbors will show up. There's people out there. My journey of recovery, people showed up. Today, people call me. I do a lot of electronic stuff right now, and we're struggling with the same identical thing a little differently, because the addiction or the conflict or the compensating behaviors that we've used to get through things, and now we can't do those, doesn't change the fact that we can by getting, and I like this word for a lot of reasons, and that's get authentic. Mm-hmm. I'm not okay. I'm struggling. But we have a certain amount of pride issues as people. So, I don't want you to know that I'm not okay. Well, why not?
Right.
What is wrong? What are you struggling with? And we are, from a biblical viewpoint, we are to carry one another's burdens.
Yeah, we're designed for community. This is what we're called into.
That's where we get back to. Jesus was about community. He had his crew. He had people. He talked to people. He went out in public. He shared. He walked. And I believe that's our expectation.
Yeah.
So,
well, listen, so here's so guys, if you don't have anybody to talk to at the church, we'd love to talk to you. You can send an email at hope@houstonvineyard.org. That's always there. Reach out. Don't do this alone. Terry, we're breaking up. It's getting weird with the internets, but I love you. You're awesome. Thank you for doing this. And that's where we're at. Like, this is, don't feel like you're alone. You're not alone. We're all going through this. And the ingredients are there for us to fall into habits and compensating behaviors that can lead to addictions and just general struggles, that we shouldn't be doing this alone. We need to do it together. And so give us some words of wisdom to end this on, Terry.
Words of wisdom. The thing that I think is that if you said it really well, if we can understand that it's a we thing, not an I thing, if we understand that we're not the only one going through this, that there are people in our world, there's the church, not just the Vineyard. There's the church. There's ways that you can, help yourself by being honest, being authentic, being real, and going, hey, I'm not okay. Who can you talk to? Sometimes, people ask me a lot. It's like, how do you do this? How do you handle all this stuff? And I find it fascinating to say, well, it's not about me. It's about me sharing my stuff with other people, because that's the rest of the story. Is I tell people about me, probably more often than I should in some cases, but I need you. And I think, I guess, Josh, I think that's probably the biggest thing. If we can understand that we need each other, community is huge. And as a community, we can solve problems. Nobody does it all by themselves.
No.
And sometimes we think we should. For society says there's all kinds of reasons, but no, I think the simplistic answer is, I need you.
And in the absence of physical community, let us not take digital connection as a substitute. Let's push forward for community.
Yes. Sometimes, yes, right now we're stuck with this. The good news is there's a return to some sort of physical touch, physical engagement. There's a drop dead date out there somewhere. It's not that far away now.
Yeah.
So can I get from here to there? Well, when we get from here to there, don't tell everybody everything's okay.
Yeah.
This is
So
what
here's where I need help. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey,
Keep it simple.
Thank you so much. You're awesome.
Thank you, sir. I'll talk to you later.
I will talk later. All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.